Hi there, I'm Erin, author of the Yokai Calling series. Today I'll be reading Chapter 1 from Spirit of the Dragon. If you don't have the book already, you can pick it up for free on most online stores and my website, and the paperback is officially available on Amazon. So, let's jump right in and read Chapter 1. Chapter 1, Masanori. Sapphire and ivory paper dragons spiraled through the Tsukiko market, suspended within translucent clouds of blue. Dancers leapt through the dragons' elegant coils, and Genchu Masanori cringed as the procession and its guards passed him. He couldn't risk being recognized, not with a blade at his side. Despite the cool evening, the stolen katana's unnatural warmth made him sweat under his howdy. Masanori scanned the swell of people applauding the dancers, searching for Aihi among the festival-goers. Nobles in azure and gold kimonos strolled towards the crimson gardens, and teens in casual yukata robes crowded around street food stalls. Sword thief or not, no one paid attention to him. However, if his mother discovered he had her katana, Masanori turned from the musk of people, fried fish, and baked sweet potatoes, and stalked towards the stone likeness of the dragon goddess Shirishi. Water flowing from her indigo mouth drifted a misty prism over her serpentine body and over the bench where Hidekazu, Masanori's twin brother, was reading a book. Once a month, the twins snuck away from the capital with Princess Aihi to train in secret. They often met at the tamashi tree on the cliffs north of Tsukiko, but this time she asked to meet in the market during the festival. Yet, almost an hour later, they still waited. Aihi was never late. Masanori's clammy hand closed around the hilt of his mother's sword, Joten, and he paced in front of the fountain. A warrior's katana. Former warrior. Golden, dancing dragons adorned the enchanted blade, so fine it wouldn't dull in 1,000 years. And if something happened to Aihi, he wouldn't hesitate to use the katana. Your anxiety is contagious. Patience shouldn't be so exhausting, Hidekazu said, his voice almost drowned out by the market's noise. His ebony hair was tied behind his neck, his wiry frame hidden by the oversized sky blue howdy sporting the Genchu family crest of dancing ravens. He waved his book at Masanori, and the gilded script on the cover, Basic Combative Ki Techniques, caught Masanori's attention. Says the one who... Masanori lowered his voice. You're not the one hiding a stolen relic. No one compelled you to lift the weapon from our mantelpiece, Hidekazu said, his eyebrows raised. I didn't have a choice, unlike you. Hidekazu snapped the book shut. You mustn't speak on matters you don't understand, Masa. Their shared dream of becoming Bushi had died when their parents abandoned their family's warrior legacy. Instead, Hidekazu trained as a guardian, a shugo, and Masanori as a key engineer. When their father decided to let Hidekazu study for the Majutsushi exams, that dream had been reignited, or so Masanori had thought. Hidekazu was hiding something. Masanori's gaze flickered past the array of dragon-shaped paper lanterns hanging over the square. Still no sign of Aihi among the mass of early festival attendees. Nothing thrilled Masanori more than sneaking away from the palace and breaking his parents' rules, regardless of the punishments involved. Getting caught meant they'd stick a guard on him for a month, or worse. Yet, over the last few years, the trips became less about disobeying his parents and more about spending time with Aihi. When Masanori glanced at Hidekazu again, he was chewing on his bottom lip. There had never been secrets between them. Did something change and Masanori never noticed? Like every other Maju, Hidekazu must have grown tired of associating with someone who didn't have a single strand of ki, the power of the divine goddess. Masanori thumbed the leather cord around his neck, weighed down by the pouch below his collar. Good thing he never told Hidekazu about his new invention. The secrets nudged Masanori's jealousy to the surface, even if there were likelier explanations. The market cleared for a group of Maju wearing dragon masks with silvery manes. Their cloaks of faux scales floated behind them, and scarlet sparked from their hands as they summoned silhouettes of Tengu and hulking Oni to frighten children. And still, no sign of Aihi. We'll waste the day waiting. Let's leave without her, Hidekazu said. The dancers and Maju passed, leaving the market to refill with excited shoppers. Charcoal from a nearby grill tinged the air, and Masanori breathed deep. No. What if Aihi's hurt? Aihi? Please. I fear for the health of anyone foolish enough to cross her. Hidekazu grabbed fistfuls of his howdy. She must be caught up in other affairs. Did you two get in another fight? At 19, Aihi, the imperial exalted dragon princess of Seiryu, was 2 years older than the twins. Though not their real sister, Hidekazu, Masanori, and Aihi had grown up in the palace together and sometimes fought like siblings. They were between Aihi and Hidekazu for the most part, since they were the Maju, and Hidekazu liked to think he knew everything. Never mind. Hidekazu indicated behind Masanori with his chin. She arrives. Aihi's raven hair was looped in a messy top knot, and she wore a plain gray kimono and hakama. Her obi sash was uneven and crinkled, like tying it had been an afterthought. In Nagaso, Aihi never wore masculine outfits, and especially not trousers, because of the strict dress code. During their outings, she justified the change as a disguise, but being late, with her appearance less than perfect, was unlike her. I began thinking something happened to you, Masanori said. Nothing bad, she grinned, a little mischievous. I convinced Tora to come to the festival with us. The festival? I thought we were going to the Tamashi tree to spar and come back for the fireworks. We will duel in the morning instead. Tora's father is being paranoid again and won't let her leave the city. Tora pressed through the crowd to join them. Like Aihi, her outfit didn't display her usual care. She wore a mismatched pink floral yukata with a black and gold sash. Her short, inky hair was frizzy, her bangs pushed to one side. She bowed in greeting, but Masanori didn't return the gesture in an effort to resist frowning. Tora's father always worried about political conspiracies and rumors of demons lurking in the rice fields, but he used fear to keep Tora on a leash. She had to know her father's intention, yet chose to obey. Why couldn't she be like Masanori, breaking unfair rules meant to make them complacent? This was supposed to be their training day. Masanori looked to Hidekazu for support, but he still wrung his howdy, though Aihi didn't seem bothered at all. Maybe they hadn't fought. Fine, we can go tomorrow, Masanori said. The women shared a silent cheer. It's been months since we last went to a festival together, ne? Tora said. Hidekazu, Masanori, and Aihi lived in Nagaso, a 2 days ride away, so their visits with Tora had become infrequent. Each had their growing list of responsibilities, and Aihi, who was being groomed to take the place of her father, the emperor, had fewer opportunities to sneak away with Hidekazu and Masanori. Often, they marveled at how her parents let her out of the cedar palace at all. When Hidekazu didn't move, Aihi pulled him to his feet and linked arms. "You cannot escape the festivities, dear Hide." "I expected not," he said. Despite his strange behavior, he resigned himself to being dragged around by Aihi. "We're going to watch the fire dancers," Masanori said. The fire dancers were his favorite show from the Midsummer Festival, and after Aihi and Tora insisted on changing their schedule, Masanori refused to do anything else first. Hidekazu perked up. "I must examine their technique." "Seriously, Hide? Do you do anything but study?" Tora snickered, covering her face with a black folding fan printed with silver cranes. "You've got your nose stuffed in a book just as often, dear Tora," Aihi said, nudging Tora's side before taking her other arm. She spun the group towards the Crimson Gardens, where the dancers always performed. "That's where you both get your charm. Fear not, dear Masa. You have charm aplenty, in your own way." Masanori smiled, despite not believing her. Although he'd gained a reputation as an excellent key engineer, the quirk was less impressive than being a Maju. Still, he had larger concerns than contradicting Aihi. Once behind the trio, Masanori touched the leather pouch under his kimono. No one had recognized Masanori so far, but keeping his mother's sword visible remained an unnecessary risk. He focused on the katana in one hand, the bag in the other, and he pulled ki from within himself and the air around him. Mechanical ticking whirred at Masanori's fingertips, and a shimmer traveled down his arms, rendering the katana's lacquered sheath almost invisible at his side. Sweat trickled along his spine at the effort. The disguise would last a few hours at most, long enough for the crowd to thicken and darkness to settle. He caught up with Aihi, Hidekazu, and Tora at the edge of the market. Colorful stalls filled with sparklers and oni masks broke off into the Crimson Gardens, which was lined with a high bamboo fence. Unlike his companions, Masanori wasn't a Maju. He couldn't call on the goddess's power, ki, at will, and under normal circumstances, he had none at all. But this new device allowed him a few tricks at a cost. The sheer number of people obscured the fire dancers' stage, so the four of them skirted the edge of the garden, careful to avoid azalea and hydrangea bushes, in search of a better view. Sulfur tinged the air, and crimson sparks whizzed above the crowd, transforming into birds and exploding in showers of light. "We'll miss the show." Masanori craned his neck to try and glimpse the dancers, but there were far too many people in the way. "We won't," Aihi said. She dragged Tora and Hidekazu in the opposite direction. "I have an idea." On the other side of the garden, Aihi stopped in front of a tree surrounded by boulders. She lifted her arms, and her aura glowed golden brown while she painted symbols in the air. The symbols, Kigo, allowed Maju to use and manipulate ki, but Masanori had never studied them. On completion, the Kigo fell into four of the largest rocks, giving them a faint inner light. "A genius plan," Hidekazu said. He, Aihi, and Tora sat, but Masanori hesitated. He hadn't imagined viewing the show from a levitating rock. Firecrackers popped behind them, and Masanori shoved aside his worries and took his place at Aihi's side. She glowed as she created another string of indecipherable symbols. When she swung her arms up, the rocks beneath them jolted. Masanori clutched his seat as they rose. but he relaxed when the experience ended up more like sitting on the edge of a high balcony than floating. A gentle breeze caught his howdy, and the silk billowed around him before he pulled it back against his sides. Hoops of amber light spun around two dark figures on the distant stage. Flames sparked around the rings as they twirled, reaching toward the sky like a miniature tornado. One dancer flipped through the blazing circles, flares falling around them in long ribbons. "This view is phenomenal." Tora fluttered her fan. "I can't believe we've never tried this before." "We normally run a habit of being punctual, dear Tora. Perhaps we should consider tardiness more often," Aihi said. Tora giggled, and she and Aihi sat close, whispering. Masanori bristled. So far, Aihi had spent more time with Tora than with him and Hidekazu. The pair didn't see each other often, and few others had earned Aihi's friendship, but Masanori didn't enjoy being ignored. A dancer jumped between fiery coils, nimble hands outstretched to meet the other performer on the stage below. For a moment, the momentum suspended the dancer midair before they flipped away, fire parting around them. They landed in a crouch, only to bounce into the sky, soaring higher like a graceful bird. Ki buzzed through the garden, caressing Masanori's skin, locking him in each moment of the performance. Strips of fire swirled behind the dancer, wrapping around them and extending until the bands grew into a serpentine body. Crimson sparks burst from the dancer's outstretched arms, and flames folded and twisted to shape a dragon's head. The beast looped through the night sky, the dancer in its jaws, trails of light following behind. A roar shuddered from the dragon's throat. Ki hit Masanori at full force, and he wobbled in place. Aihi and Tora shrieked with laughter as they fell back on the rocks. "Aihi!" Masanori grabbed her arm to keep her from falling. He hefted her up, but she brushed him off. "I'm fine, dear Masa." She kicked forward, and her foot hit something solid and invisible. Masanori settled down and tried to enjoy the show, but next to him, Aihi and Tora huddled together. Masanori settled down and tried to enjoy the show, but next to him, Aihi and Tora huddled together and continued whispering. On their other side, Hidekazu scribbled notes with a brush, glancing at the dancers between strokes. Watching the fire dancers had been Masanori's idea, but out of the four of them, he seemed to appreciate the performance the least. In the few moments he looked away, a dragon of water and ice crystals had joined the show, the second dancer suspended inside. In all the shows Masanori had seen, there'd never been two dragons at once. The dancers recaptured his attention, and he sat at the edge of his rock, entranced. The ice dragon twinkled like thousands of stars in fiery light before the dragons slammed into each other. They curled around one another, their claws locked as they writhed in place. Water boiled along the blue dragon's body, crystals dying and extinguishing tiny flames along the red dragon's sides. Their bodies wound together in a tight rope of crimson and sapphire light until they merged and exploded. Crystalline cranes of fire and ice fluttered around the dancers as they descended. Their feet touched the ground, and the birds disintegrated into shiny dust. Masanori whooped, almost as loud as the crowd below. The Hidekazu, Aihi, and Tora weren't as enthusiastic. "A stunning performance, ne?" Tora said. Aihi tapped her lip. "Beautiful, yes, but inaccurate." "Inaccurate? They've never had two dragons," Masanori said. "If accurate, the dance would have been forbidden," Hidekazu said. "The red dragon was supposed to be a wyvern, at least, per all accepted versions of the Shirishi and Ozeki creation story." No one cared about myths anymore, did they? Masanori wanted to protest. Inaccuracy didn't make the show any less amazing, but he decided against making the night any worse. The fireworks should be soon, he said. Food would be a welcome addition to our next viewing. Let's peruse the stalls before choosing the proper vantage point for the night's splendor, Aihi said. Her arms glowed, and the rocks descended, slow like drifting feathers. People scattered through the gardens after the performance ended, most drifting towards the market. A deep plum spark drew Masanori's eye to the shadows around a nearby bridge. Two figures struggled in the darkness, blue smothered by the purple. I sense strange ki nearby, Hidekazu said. Down there! The energy smacked Masanori as he pointed. Ki brushed across his skin, slow and thick like cold syrup. Pinpricks traveled up his arms. The light flashed again, and dark ki snaked through the air, wrapping around the second person who thrashed in place. We need the guards, Tora said. We are needed now, Aihi said. Their descent quickened, and she jumped before the rocks landed. Masanori leapt, and as soon as his sandals hit the ground, he raced after her. Well, that concludes the reading for today. Join me again next week for Chapter 2.